Welcome back to the Laravel News Creator Spotlight. With me today is none other than Michael Dyrynda, the creator of Laracon AU, the man that is on more podcasts than I have kids, and just all around great dude. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's just start off basic. What is a good reason somebody should come to Laracon AU?
A good reason. This is something that I, as the organizer, think a lot about, because people often ask, and I have conversations with business owners and technology leaders and people leaders and things like that, and it is different for different people. For you attending Laracon US, like I know going to Laracon US for the most part is about catching up with old friends, making new friends, meeting people that you have maybe interacted with online for the first time. And so the community and networking aspect of it, and I think that really shone through in a lot of the talks this year. Kapehe's talk, Aaron's talk last year as well, like just the connectedness. And I think that is the biggest aspect of conferences is the people and the connections, the people you meet and the connections you make. And whether that is friendships or that's, picking up a new job, or meeting someone that you end up working with in the future, collaborating on open source, things like that. Like all of these things, you don't really have any preconceived notions of when you go to a conference for the first time. So it really does vary. And if you look at the people attending the conferences, like last year at Laracon AU, at least 65-70% of the audience were first timers, like people that had never been to a Laracon. And the feel that I got from this year's Laracon US was very much the same. There was a lot of people were there for the first time. So, and whether that's lots of experience programming but attending a conference for the first time, or that's new to programming and attending your first conference with very little experience, there's, making sure that you can welcome those people, that you can make the conference approachable for those people, that they don't feel, isolated or alone. What is the main reason to go to a conference is gonna, as with anything in programming, it's gonna depend.
Absolutely. I go to talk to people because, like, I don't know, it feels like you can't do that in my little world where I live in that nobody even knows what I do. It's always fun to actually be around people that actually, at least we can have a conversation about something that we both have interest in. Yeah. So moving from there, so this is the first year it's actually moved locations, right? So this year you're going to be in Brisbane.
Brisbane.
Did I say that right? Brisbane?
Brisbane. Yep, swallow
Brisbane.
the A. Don't just pretend it's not there.
And so how far away is that from Sydney?
It's about a 2-hour flight. It's about an 8-9 hour drive, depending on how adventurous you're feeling. So it's a bit further up the coast, on the same side of Australia. So it's still, it's the only 24/7 airport in Australia. It's the biggest one we've got. So it's a very well connected city.
That's awesome. So in relation to sort of Australia, like what's probably the biggest like Laravel city? Like which city has the most Laravel developers, I guess is the better way of wording that.
Well, I thought Sydney was probably the bigger one, just because that's where we've had the last 3 Laracons, and that's where we've seen the majority of attendees from. I think this year moving to Brisbane, there was a bit of a, is it going to be problematic? Like, the people that went last year that were living in Sydney, were they only there because it was in Sydney, or are they going to travel? Are we going to make up numbers of people who don't come from Sydney with people from Brisbane? And I think it's kind of balanced out. So I think it looks as though they're fairly on par. I know that Perth has like a really big community over there, and they're starting to grow it. They're Hatchet, who's is our platinum sponsor this year. They're starting the ball rolling on getting a Laravel meetup going there regularly. So Brisbane always had a really big PHP scene. I think it's niched down a little bit into Laravel, and they're trying to keep that ball rolling as well. So yeah, it's going to be either Brisbane or Sydney, but I think that's also consistent with like there being the majority of the tech jobs in those two cities as well. Certainly in PHP and Laravel at least.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So moving from there, so this is going to be your fourth Laracon AU because I think COVID knocked one or two out, right? Um, so I'm curious more about like your origin story, like when and like what was your epiphany being like, hey, I want to create a conference in Australia for Laravel. So how did all that come about?
I actually went into this as part of my welcome address at last year's Laracon, so I'll hit like the high notes. But it like came down to I had been using PHP for 7 or 8 years, I reckon, before I discovered that there was this whole other world out there of all these other PHP programmers around the world. That there was these things called frameworks. Like I didn't know frameworks existed because everything that I did at that first job for the better part of a decade was all hand-rolled PHP. We had no notion of frameworks. We didn't even have the concept of we'll build our own framework at that point. It was all just hand-rolled PHP 3 that became PHP 4 and PHP 5. So when I kind of started to realize that there was a bigger community out there, when I discovered Laravel at the tail end of version 3 into the start of version 4, I think that was around the time that the first Laracon US happened, sort of around 2014, I think, back then. And so, it was always like aspirational to go and attend a conference. And we had one PHP conference in Australia at the time. And I went to that in 2016 and I thought it was pretty good. But I wanted to kind of explore more of what the Laravel community looked like. And then 2017, I want to say, I went to Louisville and saw Laracon US and met, my people. And that really was what it was, right? It was the community, it was the connection, it was meeting, Jake and David Hemphill and TJ Miller and yourself, like all of these people that I'd been talking to online. Matt Stauffer is a big part of my origin story in, getting into the public side of Laravel and sort of putting myself out there. And so, yeah, it was on the back of that I went, being married at the time, but not with any kids. I was like, it's an expense, right, for someone from Australia to fly 16 hours to the US or 13 hours, depending on where it is, the cost of flights, the cost of accommodation, the exchange rate, like all of this stuff. So I'm like, well, wouldn't it be great if we had something closer? Because even Europe, even further away, really, and nothing sort of this side of the world. So I emailed Tyler and I was like, hey, is this a thing that we can do? Because traveling to the other side of the world is kind of rubbish. And he was, he was all for it. He came back and was like, yep, no worries. And it took me like 2 years before we actually had the first Laracon AU. But that really was the genesis of it. Just, I want something for the people that like want to have a taste of what Laracon is, but they're not in a position to commit to traveling all that way, all that time, spending all of that money. To go and do that. So that's where we are.
I love it. That makes perfect sense. I mean, it's, Australia's always been on my bucket list. I keep telling you, I'm going to come one year. As soon as the kids are old enough to take care of themselves and drive themselves around, it's definitely on my list. It's like, got to do this.
Look forward to it.
The other thing that I thought was new this year on the website, it says you're going to have more social and networking events than normal. So you're adding like more like just, I guess, more time in for everything, or how are you planning that?
So we've got 2 like official events. So we have always had an after dark event on the first night of the conference because everyone is staying for most of the second day. What we find is that lots of people, because we do a Thursday or Friday, and I don't know if we'll change that in the future. Maybe we'll do a Tuesday, Wednesday, like Laracon US, or Wednesday, Thursday, something like that in the middle of the week. Lots of people are heading off at 3, 4, 5 o'clock on the second day and heading back home for the weekend. So we're trying to enable more people, and we're trying to encourage them, I guess, to stay the second night, to come for another event. And it seems as though it's played out pretty well, because last year in Sydney, the venue we had was really good. The theatre staff were really good, all of that, but the foyer was very small. And so there wasn't really the ability for people to kind of socialize in the breaks during lunch. We were in Darling Quarter, which was restaurants and like loads of outdoor areas and things like that. So people could go out. But what we found and what we heard from, people that gave us feedback was there's not the opportunity to interact with each other. And so that was a big focus for me this year, was to figure out how do we encourage, facilitate, make that available to people. And, that was in part a bigger venue that had a foyer that we could keep people in to, to cater for lunch, to put the sponsors in there so that people can hang out and talk to each other in the breaks. The people that speak on the second day, because, people are looking to leave, the conference kind of ends and everyone just goes home. By putting on that second day networking event after the conference, it means that those speakers get the opportunity to speak with people about their talk. So they're not disadvantaged by speaking on the second day. And then we kind of wrap that all up in this notion of watering holes, where we've gone to a couple of venues in Brisbane near to where the conference is going to be. And we've said, hey, we're going to have some number of people. Can you give us a space? Can you give us, some drink specials, some food specials, and whatever? And then that way, through our Telegram chat, the people beforehand can say, hey, I want to go to this. I'm going to this thing. Who am I going to see there? And there's this is a place that you can go knowing that there will be other Laracon people there, and you can, catch up and hang out with them without sort of having to do, I know that Laracon US and Laracon AU have had unofficial Telegram chats, and people have tried to organize things, but when it's not sanctioned, it's who am I going to hang out with? And you end up with these fragmented groups. So, we're just trying to facilitate people having as many opportunities as possible to network in and around the conference, to really make those friendships. Because, there are loads of people sending, or companies sending their people, but there's also heaps of solo developers, entrepreneurs, freelancers, that kind of thing, that don't have the connections. And so, giving them people that they can meet, and, maybe they can strike off a friendship, and then, that goes between the conference. That's what we're really trying to achieve here. It's to connect the community more than just, putting them in a room for 2 days.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah. Cause I owe pretty much my whole career to going to a conference when I was, I don't know, a decade ago, but man, it might have been 15. It was probably more than a decade, probably 20 years ago. I went to a conference and met a bunch of people, and, we still stay in touch. It's amazing. Yeah. The connections you can make at these conferences. That part's lovely. I know you're talking about the discounts, and you also have a discount on the hotel. If you are flying into Brisbane, and the picture you have on the website looks amazing. The view coming out is really sweet.
Yeah, the Brisbane Sky Tower is one of, I think, 8 different properties owned by that group. And it's 50, 60 stories tall. It's at the bend in the Brisbane River, so you can see all around the CBD behind you. You've got the river, you've got the hills. So yeah, spectacular views there. And I saw someone tweet just yesterday, actually, they're did you know you can call a hotel and ask for a discount? And they'll give you a discount? That was all it was. Lots of these places, it's just I'm hosting an event and I want somewhere to send our people, and they're yep, here's the offer, 10% off, 15% off, the best rate, best available for those specific dates, and I don't have to do anything. It's just here it is. We've just enabled it. So yeah,
that's lovely. Here, I live in a little small town, and we have a whole tourism committee or branch of the government or something like that. Yep. So you can actually contact them, and they'll give you money to run an event in their town just because they're going to get the tax money and have people downtown. So it's amazing the resources out there.
Yeah, Brisbane is the same thing. I didn't know about this, but Greg Skirman, who spoke at Laracon AU last year, put me in touch. He knew someone in the local council, and they put me in touch with the Brisbane Economic Development Agency, and their entire reason for being is to get people to host their events in Brisbane, to facilitate all of this stuff. So they put out the red carpet when I said I'd like an event. They hooked me up with 4 different venues that I went and looked at. They put me in contact with people at those venues. They gave me suggestions around, the watering hole really is their idea. We had the notion of we wanted to do something, but they're no, this is what it's called, I guess. And they put me in contact with venues, and a lot of that stuff. So when people say, it must be a lot of work. Yes, it is a lot of work to organize a conference, but there's also, if you know where to look, a lot of support for event organizers. And like, I wouldn't recommend that everyone go out and organize an event. It is a tremendous amount of work and organization, and there's like things that you don't even think of that you know, all these unknown unknowns along the way. But if you have the right people around you, a lot of it is made a lot simpler. So yeah. But yeah, you're right. Lots of cities have those development agencies because they want to bring tourism, they want to bring people into their cities. Brisbane loves to steal events away from Sydney. There's like the, you know, intercity rivalry there. So they were happy to throw out all these ideas and things like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I want to. My goal is to coordinate a golf tournament, like a tech golf tournament. But it's like the logistics behind this scares me more than, like, you know, I think going would be cool, but like, man, it's gonna be so much work, and it's like that's gonna be crazy. All right, well, let's move on. So Laracon.au is the website for everything Laracon AU, and it is coming up. What are the dates again? It's in November.
November 7th and 8th. Yeah.
So get your tickets now before it sells out and you can't get them.
Yeah.
And the lodging and everything. You know, got to get everything booked and set up. So to transition a little, in the intro, I said you had more podcasts than I have kids, and I think that's accurate. I was thinking, so you do the Laravel News podcast here on Laravel News. We appreciate that, with Jacob Bennett. Then you have North Meets South with Jacob Bennett. And then now you started another one, right? It's I can't even think of the name of it.
Ripples. Yep. Yeah, I've got Ripples. And Ripples was born off the back of Laracon AU last year. This idea that I didn't know how to illustrate or how to verbalize this idea of, like, you do things in life to kind of, it was taking Aaron's concept of, like, do things and good things will come your way, right? And it was like, well, you don't know what things are going to land. And then I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, well, yeah, it's like a ripple. When you drop a ripple, you know, you don't know where those things fan out and when they overlap and things like that. So Ripples was born out of that. And so we interview not famous people, pillars of the Laravel community, but, you know, just people that have better outcomes in life now because of the ripples through their life. You know, whatever they threw out there, whenever it happened. We had Aaron on. We've spoken to Rissa Jackson. We've spoken to Tim McDonald, Jess Archer. You know, people that you know, and maybe some that you don't. You know, 12 months ago, Rissa Jackson had never spoken at a conference, and now she's just wrapped up her Grand Slam at Laracon US, like done all 4 of them in her first year. Daniel Colborn, same thing, all 4 of them in his first year. Joe Tannenbaum is going to do all 4 of them in his first year when he speaks at Laracon AU in November. So it's like all of these things. Like Joe was an actor. We've got someone speaking at Laracon AU this year that was a chemistry major that is now an engineering team lead. We've got Aaron Francis himself started life as an accountant, and now he's, you know, Aaron Francis. So all of these things, when you think about it, they're all kind of the same notion of just doing things and putting yourself out there, and who knows what good unexpected things come your way. To borrow and again paraphrase our Laravel dad in Aaron Francis.
Yeah, but it's so true though. Like, you know, you show up and you just put stuff out there, and then eventually something sticks, and something like moves your career forward or moves your life forward, and it's just sort of amazing. Like, you know, that's like me doing this podcast. You know, I know you host the Laravel News podcast. We were just talking before we started. Like, I've really never been on it, and I didn't really want to be on it, and now I'm like getting more comfortable. And it's like, well, if you don't throw yourself out there, then, you know, nothing good's going to happen. So you're just going to be behind the computer all day. Right. So yeah, it's pretty sweet. So what actually like what got you into podcasting originally? Because you've been doing it for 10 years now.
Since 2016, I think, is when Jake and I started North Meets South. So yeah, it's a better part of 10 years. It just seemed like the thing to do at the time. Everyone was starting a podcast back then, and it was a way to communicate with the Laravel community. And it's like, it feels a lot of the time like a one-way communication. That Jake and I get together every other week on North Meets South. We get together every other week, and we do Laravel News, and we talk talk about stuff, and it feels like an echo chamber. But every now and then you'll come across someone, Jake said he met heaps of people at Laracon US this year that came up and said, thanks for the podcast, thanks for everything you do. And it's like, you don't really realize when you're doing the podcasting, because people don't always run to the comments unless you're doing something diabolical. You're farming for engagement, or you've got controversial takes. Like, people were just like, oh yeah, there was a podcast episode, and like, people listen. Like, we see that people continue to listen to it all these years later, so it's not all that bad. But yeah, it was just a way of putting my ideas and my thoughts out there. It sometimes serves as a bit of a like status update for my boss, who I know listens to the podcast, because a day or two later he's like, so that's what you worked on last week. So it's it's good to stay in touch with Jake, because of the time difference and like the physical distance. Keeping in touch with like, we've seen each other's kids grow up, and we've been in touch for a long period of time. So and it's
I was gonna ask you about that. How can y'all schedule that? Because like right now I'm East Coast time, and I think me and you are like 12 hours different. No, is it 12 hours difference?
16? Oh no, you're forward. Yeah, 12. Yep.
Yeah, so it's 8:00 p.m. my time, which I think is 8:00 a.m. your time. And it wasn't the easiest one to schedule. So how do y'all do that each week with kids and and life? I guess is the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I do it on my lunch breaks usually, which is right after Jake's kids get to bed, and that's just what we have found has worked for us. And it's always one of us messaging the other on a recording day to like make sure, hey, we still on, because sometimes things come up. Sometimes I've got to go and pick the kids up early. Sometimes Jake's held up somewhere. So and we do reschedule from time to time. We try really hard to make sure that we always get our episodes out on Thursday, but sometimes life gets in the way, and we just have to bump it a day, or we skip a week sometimes because someone's had to travel. So yeah, it's just a matter of keeping on top of it. I would love to do something more local, which is why I started doing Ripples, because Greg and I are only an hour apart. So that makes life definitely a lot easier to schedule, because we don't have to reason about times and things happening and whatever else. But yeah, two of the and it helps that two of those podcasts, it's Jake and I, right? So we know that the schedule is the same. It's just we alternate between what we're talking about, which is good. Ripples has been a bit more difficult to manage, because it's as soon as you introduce a third person, you're now trying to schedule 3 time zones, which gets a bit like, because we're close, it's okay, but like when it's me, Jake, and a third person, that can get a bit, especially when they're in like Europe, it gets a bit funny. So, but yeah, there's that, and then that's only 3 of the podcasts. You mentioned I've got more podcasts than kids. I've got another one which I kind of picked up for a bit, and then didn't really do a lot beyond like 8 episodes, which was Push Pop, which was just like a look back, look forward kind of thing that fizzed out after I did Laracon last year. And another one that I'm going to pick up again in the next few weeks, which is like seasonal, is the Road to Laracon, which we'll use to interview Laracon AU speakers. So that will be coming out again in the next little while as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That brought me to another question. So the Laracon AU like Twitter account, LinkedIn account, you have all these little videos of the speakers. Is that all coming from the recordings from that Road to Laracon, or is that these are just separate things that you're just doing now?
Yeah. This was just like an idea that I had very last minute last year, and like the speakers were very good to me, and they all kind of really took on the challenge of doing it. And so this year it was like part of the submission process was, we are going to ask you to do this, and it will be like a planned out thing that we're doing. So we've got, I think, 4 or 5 left of them. There'll be another one coming out later tonight for you, I suppose. And then I think we've probably got 3 or 4 left. And then we've got some other social media stuff coming as well. We've got, just to keep everything front of mind for people in the lead up to November, as we try and sell the last few tickets to the conference.
I love that. So speaking of time zones, like, like where's most of the Laravel world, I guess? Like when you jump on the internet, is pretty much everybody's day done, and you just kind of catch up that way? I mean, it seems like with me and you, we have such a big overlap, even though we talk a lot. I miss a lot of stuff you do, and you probably miss a lot of stuff I do, just because of how like the different social media feeds like come up and show stuff. Is that ever a struggle for you, or is that more like it's just fine and that's just the way it is?
Yeah, there's the social, especially in the last 18 months or whatever it's been since all the APIs got shut down and Tweetbot was not, because I used to use Tweetbot all the time, and Tweetbot gave you a chronological, no algorithm, nothing. It was just like, this is everything. And sometimes there would be, I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be hundreds, and I was a Twitter completionist. I would like scroll and read everything. So now it's a bit more hit and miss. Like even in the following feed, it's not everything, and things are out of order, and it tries to sort things based on like popularity and how many replies there are in the threads and all this like weird, like it's kind of chronological but kind of not. And so obviously the like the dramatic stuff always bubbles up and you see that, but there's bits and pieces that get missed, like, and you just pick up or you don't, and someone will tell you about it if it's really important. But I like to try and keep tabs on it. There's a bit of overlap in my afternoons with the European crew. But most of what happens in the US, which is where the majority of like the active Laravel people are, happens while I sleep. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. This year I actually went to that Laravel Lab in London, and it was wild just, waking up and being like nothing going on the internet. Yeah. And then it's all of a sudden, like we would go to the conference and it was like, after it was over, everything, the whole day was over. So it was like, then everything's flooding in. It was like, it was kind of hard to retrain my brain how all that works. But now that you come back, it's like, well, I can't keep up anyway, because it's like going too fast now. But anyway, it's time zones are interesting. It's the man's greatest invention.
Yeah, that's right. You learn to deal with it.
Yes.
You don't. I mean, I don't have a choice. You just have to go with the flow.
Yeah. So moving on. This is a way back question. When did you first find Laravel? What version or what year?
Yeah, I think I did touch on it a little bit earlier. I think it was probably around 2011, like around then. Maybe. Yeah, I feel like it was 2011, and it was like in the version 3. Like there was no composer yet. It was all of the like built-in plugin things. The first time I really got
the bundles.
The bundles, yeah. The first time I really got to look at it was probably version 4.1 when I'd like transitioned to working at an agency, and we had our own in-house framework at the time, and so, or in-house CMS. So this was like looking at Laravel as a way to kind of improve on that, to modernize it a little bit. So yeah, it's been, what are we, 2014 now? So it's been 13 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. I was talking to somebody else about it. It's like that version, it was like late version 3, early version 4. It seems like Laravel sort of just I don't want to say took over PHP, but that's when it really started to build a lot of traction, because you meet a lot of people that came in right around that same time, which
and you were there right at the genesis, working with Taylor at Userscape.
Yeah, but I still think like one was only like a week. It came out like a week, and then version 2 came out. I want to say I was, because I actually helped build the bundle site when I worked at Userscape, and that was when me and Taylor worked together. And then of course, Composer sort of took over everything, and it was way better with Composer than trying to install some bundles and stuff. But yeah, I think I found it, man. I don't know how many years ago that was, but just never left. I was like, this is my people. I like Laravel.
Yeah, and it's managed to its credit and to Taylor's credit, managed to keep a lot of that community, a lot of that feel from those early days. It'll be interesting to see how things go now with the funding and all of that. But I don't the episode hasn't come out yet, but the episode, I talk a little bit about it. I'm optimistic for what this actually means, not just for Laravel, not just for Taylor and his business, but for the Laravel community at large, and even like the trickle down this will have on PHP as a language and as a wider ecosystem. So it'll be interesting see how that goes.
For sure. I'm very bullish. It's going to be good for everybody. Not only like you said for Taylor and that team, but now we're getting PHP in the front of CEOs' minds because, it's on the front page of Fortune magazine and probably Bloomberg and whoever else at this point. So it's definitely going to get into more eyeballs than just developers. And in theory, that should help everybody in the community. The other thing I love is how Laravel seems like it has not gotten stale since it was created. I think that's sort of the demise of a lot of the other frameworks that was in the PHP space at those early days. They kind of, they had a big bang and then they just kind of fizzled and just didn't get updates, didn't get anything. And then Taylor and Laravel, they just keep pushing the bar and trying to, make everything better. So I think that's awesome.
And it's always, I think those other frameworks, maybe they always try to do their own thing. They always try to innovate, where Laravel has never been afraid or shy to look at what other communities are doing and to borrow ideas and to improve ideas. And it goes the other way as well. There are things in Laravel now that Symfony has done for a while, and there are things that Symfony does now that Laravel did, and there are things in Rails. Active Record, Eloquent comes from Rails, but there are things in the Rails ecosystem that have come from Laravel. So, that the ideas are good enough to cross between language and framework boundaries means that, everything keeps going. Not everyone's going to come up with all of the original ideas in Laravel or in Rails or in Symfony or wherever, but that they can be transitioned in a way that they are the same thing but done in the Laravel way or the Rails way or the Symfony way, means that, all of this keeps moving forward. And, I think Taylor was probably the first one really that found a way to commercialize open source in such a way that maintaining the free stuff was viable as a full-time thing.
Yeah. I think, speaking about the commercial side, I think back to sort of the CodeIgniter / Expression Engine days. They had Expression Engine as the commercial entity, and then they had CodeIgniter as sort of the framework that sort of came out of Expression Engine. But they were never, I don't know if you used either one of them way back in the day, but they were not one-to-one pairing, basically. If Expression Engine was so different code-wise than CodeIgniter itself, it's you couldn't just marry them together. Even though you knew CodeIgniter, you might not know all the Expression Engine. And I think that was one of the cool things with sort of Laravel and everything he creates out of Laravel. It's it's married right to the framework. If you're used to Laravel, you can just pick up any of these tools that we use simply. Of course, and then Forge is just, all the other tools are just awesome to use. And it's well, yeah, of course this should have been a product, 20 years ago. This is amazing.
Yeah. And there's third party things out there, there's alternatives and things like that are maybe cheaper, but that number one, using the first party tools, you are funding the development of the open source stuff and the framework and things like that. But as you say, you're going to have that familiarity of experience when you use any of those things. And there's friction points for different people at different times, but by and large, those tools, and that's going to be the same for everything. The thing that is built for the 98% use case is going to raise the IR of 2%. But, I'll take 98% any day.
All right. So when you're not working, podcasting, doing anything else, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do off the computer?
Well, I don't like doing it, but I have got back into it. I've started running again. I used to love playing basketball, but my knees have finally said it's time to stop that. So I've stopped playing basketball. Still love watching it. Still love watching Australian rules footy. A lot of my time outside of that really is just spent with the kids, especially now they're at a fun age, 4 and 6, and it's just always talking, always discovering things. It's fun watching my eldest learning to read now. It's just, and he's getting more confident with it, and so we're sitting in the car and he'll be reading the song names that come up on the on the infotainment. It's this, it is this. It's very good. And
I love that.
Yeah, that's where a lot of my time goes now. And then at the end of the day, I know that for a lot of people, you love your job, you program, and I like the idea of going and sitting on the computer after everyone's gone to bed and programming, but I can't. it's TV, like 1 or 2 episodes of something, and then bed, and then get up and do it all again.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've been trying to do a much better, work-life balance. It's like, I want to work from, whatever, 8 to 5, and I want to be done and just shut off the computer, even though it's at home and like, I can do it. And there's some things that might need to be done. It's like, you got to have that, or otherwise like everybody suffers. And my wife's like, you're not paying me attention. And my kids are like, you're ignoring me. So it's the fun part of working from home like we do is the, that conversion there. Sort of to transition that one, what advice would you give to developers looking, that might want to, I think I worded this question wrong on here. Let me rephrase this. What's the number one piece of advice you have received, in relation to web development from maybe somebody else?
I'm the worst person to ask that because my memory, like I couldn't tell you any specific piece of advice, and I couldn't tell you any specific person that gave it to me. I remember one person in my formative years who was the absolute worst teacher, but he was also the best teacher in that he would take me through a problem and he would show me like we could do it like this, we could do like, he'd show me different ways to do it. And then at the end of the day, he'd be like, "Did you get that?" I'd be like, "Yeah." And then we would have a social chat, like, and he knew this every time. Like, he would then distract me from what he just told me, and then he'd like close his editor and be like, "All right, we'll go and like do that." So it like he showed me lots of different ways to do things, and he was a big part of my formative programming. But he was like just a really bad teacher. One piece of advice that I would impart just through learned experience is to not get bogged down in the minutia of programming. There's no perfect way in the quote unquote real world. There's no perfect or right or correct way. Yes, there's correct and like academic ways to do things, and yes, there are patterns and processes and things like that we follow because they are tried and true and repeated and all of that. I get that. But when you are learning to program, I think the most important and impactful way that you can do that is to just get something on the page, to write some code that does something in the browser. You're not building a Fortune 500 company. You are learning to program for the first time. And so whatever you can do that like makes you enjoy what you're doing without getting bogged down in the details of like how specific things work or should work, or whether they're like, the conversation we've had this week is around Larastan and whether or not that should be part of the default Laravel installation. None of that stuff matters when you are learning to program. I think Laravel goes a long way to teaching you how to ship something, which is the framework mantra. It was a big part of the keynote this year, is to just ship. And like when you are learning, the best way to keep the motivation and the energy going is to just ship. And that is to do whatever it takes to make yourself happy with, like, you put something out into the world and you can revisit it later. Like, people need to remember that you can change what you've written. You own the code. You can change it.
Yeah, it's not a painting. You can actually adjust it later. Yes,
that's right.
That's actually how I got started though. It's the same way. It was like I had this product idea in my mind, and I was like, just do whatever I can do to get it something that would work. And back then it was like this was before framework, so you had PHP and I think was ASP, and then I just used I started off with front page, and then I was using Dreamweaver because they had all these little bindings and stuff that you could sync it to your database and stuff. And it was terrible. Like I bet if I looked at that now, it would be, you would say that was just trash, but it worked. And it was like, hey, this is amazing. I love this, I love this career. And that's what sort of, inspired me and made me drive to, want to continue down this path all these years later. It's exciting.
The minutia and the specifics and the correctness, let that ruin your life later. Just enjoy it when you're trying to learn it for the first time.
Exactly. So one final question. What have you been excited about lately?
I mean, Laracon Australia. I'm very excited just about the direction we're taking. I've this never happened to me with any of the previous ones, but I've been waking up in the middle of the night just from like the weirdest dreams about rocking up on day one, and I'm like, I'm there on the wrong day and there's no one there, or setting up the theater and one of the theater staff was on some scaffolding and they fell down and broke. Like just these weird things that like have never happened in previous Laracon. So I'm really excited about doing a bigger event, like a bigger Laracon. Previously it was like some talks and an after party. This year we're really trying to connect people, and I'm really excited about that prospect, and I hope that it resonates with the people. And I hope, like, I know I said before, it's a long way to travel for us to go to the US, but we would do it because the US is like, the big main event. And I would love to put on an event that makes people really seriously consider, maybe coming to do AU in the future. I know that there's a few people, I'm not going to out them, that's up to them, but I know that there's a few people that are making the journey because they love coming to Australia, because they love the experience that they've had here. And I hope that, we can be a destination conference in the future. So, yeah.
I love it.
I'm really,
I love it.
really excited about it. And we're, 6 weeks out now, so...
Yes, it's gonna be a great event. You have my full confidence because this is your couple years into this. You got this, and you always done a professional job. But if you don't have anything else to add, I think we're just going to end the episode here. I want to thank Michael Dyrynda for joining us, talking about life and Laracon AU and everything else in between. So thanks again for watching, and thanks for being here.
No worries.